are you an activist? Do you describe yourself as that? And what does that mean to you?
Sure, I am an activist in the sense that I explicitly take on as some of my jobs to make a change in social problems that I worry about. And I think that's as good a definition of an activist as you could hope for. I think some of the fiction I write is activist, which doesn't mean that it's not also driven by this aesthetic desire to make the best story I can, but it is always also about this wider thing about seeing how I can help make problems that I worry about a little better. Yeah.
It was two incidents you kind of cited to me. One was your campaign against SOPA, and one was another realization you had with Mozilla and some other people when it came to trying to convince them to change policies or not go the way of Netflix and BBC. Can you just summarize those two?
Sure. Well, SOPA was another campaign Aaron worked on.
Right,
you know?
Yeah, I know.
SOPA was this terrible, it was a lot like the Digital Economy Act that was passed on the last day of the Gordon Brown Parliament. It was this really bad sweeping copyright law that would have materially broken the internet as we understood it in the US. And I was in DC the week before it was introduced. We all knew it was coming. We'd seen the discussion drafts. And all of my Hill Rat DC friends said, go home and figure out how to live in a world where SOPA is law. Don't try and figure out how to stop SOPA from coming into being, because they have the votes. The industries that back this have given so much money to the Congress people who have signed on to it that there's no way you can win, because they can't get reelected without campaign dollars. And Aaron helped design this tool that let us black out people's websites if they were worried about SOPA. When you visited the website, it would black the website out, and it would say, my website will have to go dark if SOPA passes. Tell me what your postcode is, your zip code, and I'll tell you who the senator and congressman are and where they stand on this. And with one click, you can phone them and give them a piece of your mind about my website disappearing. And we put 8 million phone calls through to Congress in 72 hours. And those Congress people realize that as hard as it is to get reelected without campaign finance, it's much harder to get reelected without votes. And SOPA died like that. It was amazing. And so
that impressed you, that you were even able to do something like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, talk about blowing up the Overton window. Nobody knew what to make of it. It was funny because I helped organize that campaign, and I have a pretty good insider's view of how it played out. And at the very end, Google put a tiny text notice up on their homepage, which was definitely helpful. But Hollywood's narrative about it was, the entertainment industry's narrative was, Google killed SOPA. They literally could not understand that those 8 million people had phoned before Google put their notice up, and the reason they'd done it is because of people power. It was absolutely incomprehensible to them. And then a couple of years later, in 2013, the World Wide Web Consortium, which is this body that makes open standards for the web, and it's their openness is really why the web has been as open as it is. It was founded by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who's invented the web, the British physicist who was at the CERN Institute in Geneva when he came up with this idea, and famously never patented it so that it could be open to everyone. They, in a moment of very poor judgment, decided that they would cave into pressure from major rights holders groups, including Netflix and the BBC, to add what's called digital rights management to the core standards for the web. And this is the stuff that tries to stop you from playing out-of-region DVDs on your DVD players. It's what HP installed when they last March, they pushed out a security update to many of their inkjet printers. And then as of September, after it silently counted down month after month, all of those printers spat out their inkjet cartridges, refused to use third-party inkjet cartridges. It's anything that teaches a computer to disobey its owner. And DRM is governed by some very special, very weird laws. In 1998, the US passed a law called the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or DMCA, which has a clause, section 1201, that says tampering with or removing DRM, even on something you own, even for a totally legitimate and lawful purpose, is against the law. It's a felony, punishable by a 5-year prison sentence and a $500,000 fine for a first offense. And in the EU, they enacted the European Union Copyright Directive in 2001, which includes Article 6, which has substantially the same provisions and became the law of the land here in the UK. And so it's all over the world, these laws. It's a kind of plague of crappy internet law. The US Trade Representative is rammed down everyone's throats. And so once you have a product or a standard or a technology covered by DRM, it means that extending it or improving it or even doing security research into it to reveal the defects in it can all be potentially both civil and criminal crimes or violations. And we can't afford to have this in the web, right? We can't afford to have several billion internet users whose web browsers can't be researched by security researchers and whose defects can only be disclosed if the companies that make them decide that they're okay with being embarrassed by revelations about mistakes that they made, mistakes that might incur liability against them. We can't afford to have this technology governed by laws that prohibit institutions that serve people with disabilities from expanding them and extending them to enable them to adapt to people with disabilities. So for example, with video, a famous security researcher named Dan Kaminsky met someone who had color blindness. And he realized that every color blindness is different, but that a computer could measure the color blindness. And then once it had been measured, it could change the video's colors to match their color blindness so they would see it properly. And the person he designed it for, when he first showed it to her, she burst into tears. She'd never seen anything that beautiful. But he can't add that technology to video defined by this World Wide Web Consortium standard without permission from the companies. And if they withhold it, then he's just out of luck. And he's just the first of many people who are going to come up with adaptive technologies. And it means that people who have legitimate ideas for making the technologies better that the companies don't like will be frozen out. The companies get to decide who gets to compete with them. So you'll remember when Netflix launched, their business was shipping DVDs around. It was like Love Film here in the UK.
Yeah.
And the studios hated it. They said it was a crime, they said it was wrong, they said it was immoral, they said it would put them out of business. And Netflix said, that's not our problem. And now Netflix has said, well, if you want to invent a legitimate add-on technology for Netflix, like a PVR that lets you save a show for later, when you're on a plane or when you have better bandwidth or whatever, they say that even though that activity is legal, recording a program in your sitting room is legal, that's why VCRs and PVRs are legal, that because you have to bypass their DRM to do it, and because bypassing DRM is against the law, that they can stop you from doing it. So the World Wide Web Consortium took this terrible decision. And Mozilla, who are a nonprofit foundation that has done some of the most important, vital work to keep the web open, including creating the free and open browser Firefox, which is the standards bearer for openness on the web, they decided that they would go along with it too. And for the first time in their history, they started pushing proprietary non-open code that no one was allowed to look inside with their browsers to support this, because they thought that without Netflix support, they would lose too many users and cease to be relevant and cease to exist.
Really, that was why?
Yeah. And this is a disaster because we can't afford to allow companies to define our relationship with their products after we've purchased their products. Because the way the law stands now is if you have a product that has a copyrighted work inside of it, anything with software, and you design it so that you have to bypass digital rights management to modify or reconfigure that software, that you can design the product so that any modification that undermines the business model of the product is a felony. We have allowed corporations to decide that they can force us to order our affairs to use our property in the way that is most commercially beneficial to them. Now, when Blackstone wrote his classic treatise on property in the 18th century, in the 1700s, he defined private property as that which we have sole and despotic dominion over, right? A thing is yours if you are its dictator and get to decide how it's used. But in a world of universal digital rights management, the dead hand of the manufacturer lies on top of your property forever, and it ceases to be your property. It becomes something that you are a tenant of, right? Like in the old feudal days, only lords could own property, and the tenant farmer could use that property in the way the lord permitted them to. We're ushering into being a world in which the only organizations that own property are corporations, and private individuals can only use the property in ways that corporations deem most advantageous to them. We are one RFID sensor away from dishwashers that reject third-party dishes. We are one machine vision system away from a toaster that rejects unauthorized bread. And the way that we're going to control all of those is with browsers. And the World Wide Web Consortium and the Mozilla project are both leading us, along with Google and Microsoft and Apple and all of the other major web technology companies, into a world in which all of those technologies will be regulated in ways that will be antithetical to both good security. They'll be off limits to security researchers, and all the ways that you can be harmed by vulnerabilities in them will be illegal to disclose to you, and also antithetical to innovation and adaptability, openness, and private property itself.
Continue watching this fascinating conversation for free by clicking on the link below to visit our website, learn from the best minds in the world, and connect with a community of passionate people building the best versions of themselves. Just click on the link below, and I'll see you on the inside.